Renowned Gisela and her Flamenco Fiesta and the Nancy Hauser Dance Company in full concert and in matinees for children. Be one of the people who can talk about this extraordinary event for weeks afterward. Call the Guild of Performing Arts at 333-8268 for reservations.
Eyewitness News, the Northwest's most complete, comprehensive, and up-to-the-minute coverage. With weatherman Roy Finden, sportscaster Ed Karrow, and anchorman Stan Turner.
Good evening, everyone. We are coming on the air at this unusually early hour tonight with the late edition of Eyewitness News so that we can bring you the Kick soccer game tonight here on Channel 5 at 10. We are halfway through a truly beautiful summer-like weekend here in the Twin Cities area, but at this moment, the boys of winter, the Minnesota North Stars, are fighting at the Met Sports Center to increase their Stanley Cup playoff edge over the Montreal Canadiens. It's a live picture you're watching, and right now the North Stars are trailing. Ed Karrow will have details on that game a bit later in the sports. In the news, striking auto workers voted today in St. Paul on a new contract from International Harvester. Also in St. Paul today, a sporting goods store burned early this morning, leaving damage estimated in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And Cubans, estimated in the millions, marched through Havana today in support of Fidel Castro. We'll have those stories and more to come tonight, but at the top, Barbara Tim of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, is in Tehran tonight trying to see her son, Kevin Hermaning. He's been held hostage in the American embassy there now for 168 days. Tim and her husband arrived in Tehran early this morning after getting a visa from Iranian authorities in Paris yesterday. That in defiance of President Carter's ban on travel to Iran this week. At a news conference later, she told reporters that she'd already been in touch with militants at that embassy.
I called over to the embassy and I talked to one of the students and I asked him if it would be possible for us to come and talk with the students. They told me that they would have to decide and they would make an announcement either today or tomorrow. We want so deeply to meet with the Ayatollah. We are prepared to get down on our knees and plead for an opportunity to meet with him.
Besides wanting to see her son, Kevin, she said she also wants to understand Iranians and find out why they hate Americans. There's still no word on whether or not that she will see Khomeini or her son. In Chicago today, 15 relatives of the American hostages gathered for a briefing from the U.S. State Department. Among them, Richard Hermaning, the father of hostage Kevin, that is, and the former husband of Barbara Tim. Hermaning says that he does not think that her visit to Tehran will do any good.
I don't know if it's really going to prove anything as far as getting him out of there any quicker, and if it'll satisfy her mind and will not do any detriment as far as being able to leave him behind, then it's her decision, but to me, I really don't want to comment too much on it.
And from Tehran today, no changes to report as regards the 50 American hostages who have been locked up there now at the American Embassy for 24 weeks. But in Bogota, Colombia today, guerrillas holding the Dominican Embassy did release one of their 20 hostages, an envoy from Costa Rica. He is reported to be in good health, no indication when the others might be freed. In Havana, hundreds of thousands of Cubans marched in support of Fidel Castro today on this 19th anniversary of the U.S.-sponsored Bay of Pigs invasion attempt. They shouted angrily as they passed the Peruvian embassy where 5,000 Cubans seek sanctuary in new nations. Castro supporters called them trash and parasites and urged them to leave Cuba quickly. Until yesterday, those Cuban refugees were being flown to Costa Rica for processing and transport for their new homes. But Castro ordered those flights ended, saying the refugees must now fly directly to the nations that are taking them in. That'll slow down the evacuation process considerably. That angered about 3,000 Cubans in New York City. They demonstrated against Castro today and voiced support for those in the Peruvian embassy trying to get out of Cuba. In other news tonight, striking auto workers at International Harvester are voicing their support for a new contract agreement with the company, and that includes 150 St. Paul workers who have been on strike since November the 1st.
UAW leaders are calling the contract a big victory for the union. One union spokesman called it an economic package that meets or exceeds the industry pattern. When the strike began, many employees at Harvester's St. Paul plant thought it would be a short one. The workers charged it was the company that was taking things away. They wanted to keep their old contract intact. It took 6 months, and it appears they got what they wanted. The union calls it a victory. This morning, about 100 employees sat down to discuss the agreement. It includes a quarterly cost of living adjustment, plus a 3% raise for each of the 3 years in the contract. The average hourly wage will be $9.71. The workers ratified the contract by a vote of 82 to 20.
I'm real satisfied. I can't wait to get back and earn some money.
Even though the weather's getting nice and you have to go back to work now.
Well, if you're worried about money, nothing is really that great, so it'll be good to be back.
The union reportedly forced the company to abandon demands for mandatory overtime. One employee called that a real win for employee rights.
I think it's definitely a victory in the area of rights, because that's really what it was about. Nobody wants to work for 60 or 80 hours a week, and that's what it would have come to eventually.
The Steiger Tractor Company of Fargo felt the pinch of the Harvester strike. It laid off 400 employees because it couldn't get parts from Harvester. Company officials said even if the strike ended this month, the jobs could not be saved because of the time needed to replenish its inventory. Tony Vigneri, Channel 5, Eyewitness News.
That strike has idled about 35,000 International Harvester workers in some 8 states. About a quarter of them voted on the new contract today, approving it by a whopping 8-to-1 margin. If that trend holds in tomorrow's voting, they will be back at work next week. 2 persons were arrested today in connection with a double murder at a cabin near Milaca, Minnesota. The bodies of Carl Hummel and David Milan were found at the burnt-out cabin on Monday. Both had been shot and their bodies badly burned. Today, a 26-year-old man and a 19-year-old woman were arrested in the Twin Cities and then transported to the Mille Lacs County Jail, where they will be held on probable cause. They've not been charged or identified yet. A 3-alarm blaze at Steichens Sporting Goods in St. Paul early this morning. $250,000 worth of sporting equipment was damaged, but no one was hurt. Officials are still investigating that blaze. They say it started in 2 places, so arson has not been ruled out. That fire at the Williams Pipeline Company in Roseville was officially declared out at 6 o'clock this morning. The fire started after an explosion on Wednesday, which killed 1 man and injured 3 others. They are still in the hospital, 1 in critical condition, the other 2 in serious condition. Officials say a fire crew will stay at the Roseville plant over the weekend while safety and cleanup operations get underway. And a full fire watch alert is still in effect for much of Minnesota tonight. It's the warm, dry, windy weather that's keeping the firefighters so anxious and at times so busy. So far this year, the Department of Natural Resources says between 500 and 550 fires have burnt more than 20,000 acres of brush and grassland. In Minneapolis this afternoon, a 32-year-old Dakota County man drowned in Lake of the Isles. Dominic Gaiete was seen wading in the water just before he disappeared. Gateway was passers-by, actually. 5 of them went in after him. Gaiete died an hour later at Hennepin County Medical Center. Despite the warm weather, the city beaches are not yet open, so we urge you to be extra careful. Some residents of South Minneapolis are upset about the coming loss of a neighborhood fixture, and NSP may have a rate break for people who like to use power at odd hours. We'll get to those stories and more in just a moment.
Let's see. You and your spouse can put up to $6,000 a year in TCF for each child without paying any gift tax. Even better, you avoid paying income taxes on the interest it earns. That's because the account is in the children's names and they don't earn enough to pay taxes. And best of all, you keep control of the money as custodian of the account. Ask TCF about custodial accounts. And if you don't have any kids, I'll find you some.
You've seen them on television. Now see these international skating stars in person, one performance only. An outstanding array of sensational ice champions from around the world in the 1980 Olympic Figure Skating Tour. Breathtaking jumps and spins, spectacular dancing, incredible pair skating. Don't miss the thrills and excitement of the 1980 Olympic Figure Skating Tour.
Coming to the Met Center Sunday, April 27th, 8 p.m. Tickets at the Met, Dayton's, Donaldson's, or charged by phone.
Continental Mark 6 challenges Cadillac in room, in luxury, and in mileage. In fact, no Cadillac 6 or 8-cylinder gets better gasoline mileage ratings than Mark 6. And no Cadillac combines the Mark's automatic overdrive, standard electronic instrumentation, spacious interiors, and sumptuous ride. Continental Mark 6 for $1980, 2-door and 4-door. It will challenge your idea of what a luxury car can be.
Many residents who live near the 6th Precinct Police Station in South Minneapolis do not want it closed. The city is consolidating some of its precinct stations, and the 6th is scheduled to be shut down. But as Channel 5 reporter Steve Sanger tells us here, the station's neighbors don't like the idea.
Police protection comes from patrol cars, not from buildings, according to the police brass. And by closing the 6th Precinct and others, the city can put more patrol cars on the street. Police officials also point to the fact that there is no evidence to show that the physical presence of a precinct station in a community reduces crime. But when Police Chief Boza meets with residents next week, he's going to have a hard time convincing many of them. Just walk into Hool's Bar next door to the 6th, and they'll tell you.
Without them here, the neighborhood would really go downhill. People are talking about moving out already, are carrying guns and sidearms or whatever they have to protect themselves, and it shouldn't be that way. It's not fair.
What kinds of people do you think you have around here that need to be watched?
Hustlers, pimps, prostitutes, winos, panhandlers.
The 6th Precinct is a high-crime area, and the presence of the station gives most residents a feeling of security. They don't like the idea that it's going.
I'm very unhappy. I've got a young daughter, and I would like to see the police cars stay in the area.
What do you think is going to happen?
I think the crime's going to go up. I don't think it's going to be any help by putting 10 extra officers on the street.
But in addition to putting more patrolmen on the street, the consolidation plan is expected to save the city $2 million a year. And that's a combination that may be hard to beat. Steve Sanger, Channel 5 Eyewitness News, Minneapolis.
Minnesota Republicans today began selecting delegates to their national convention, and Ronald Reagan came out on top today, winning all 6 of the delegates selected in the 6th and the 7th district. 28 more have yet to be chosen. In 2 other states, Reagan traded wins with George Bush. Reagan clobbered Bush in a straw poll at the Nevada GOP convention, which means you should easily win in the Nevada primary, which is next month. But Bush took 17 of 21 delegates selected for the national convention at a state gathering in Maine today. Campaigning in Pennsylvania for that state's primary next week, Bush told reporters that his victory in Maine proves the Republican race is not over yet, despite Reagan's commanding delegate lead. Bush said he may have the momentum once again. Meanwhile, President Carter maintained his leads over Senator Ted Kennedy in Iowa, Oklahoma, Virginia, and Mississippi as Democrats gathered in those states today. Tomorrow, Minnesota Democrats will select 18 of the state's 75 delegates to the Democratic National Convention. At a market in Philadelphia today, Kennedy called the president a hypocrite. Just yesterday, Carter called him the biggest spender in Senate history. But Kennedy responded today that Carter's to blame for the biggest budget deficits in U.S. history. By the end of this summer, a new NSP idea might help reduce budget deficits a little in Minnesota homes, and it might help the utility avoid building some new power plants. Channel 5's Tom Wayne reports.
Between the hours of 9 in the morning and 9 at night, its peak hours, NSP has to generate power at nearly full capacity to meet demand, especially in the summer. So if that demand does not stop rising, NSP will have to build new plants. It hopes to avoid that by prodding customers to use power during off-peak hours, early in the morning, late at night, and on weekends, when demand is traditionally low. And NSP hopes cheaper rates for those promising to shift electrical use to off times will provide some incentive. Right now, NSP charges home users about 4 cents a kilowatt hour, a bit more in the summer, a bit less in the winter. That rate schedule would stay the same for most customers. Those switching to off-peak schedule would pay as little as 2 cents for every kilowatt hour used during off hours. That obviously would save them a lot of money. But whenever they use power during peak demand times, they'd lose a lot more, since NSP would charge them much higher rates during the week to discourage backslipping. And because of that, NSP's Tom Boucher told producer Chris Ballamut that the utility does not really know how many customers would benefit.
It's risky to talk about savings unless a consumer looks at his individual situation. Some categories of consumers, if they're willing to change their living patterns and usage patterns, could save money. For most people, in order to save, they would have to change the way they live. Do the washing on the weekends or at night. Take your shower earlier in the morning so your water heater is all charged up by 9 o'clock in the morning, things like that. It's customer directed, and the customer has to make the decisions and the sacrifices, if you want to call them that. So it's hard for us to predict what they're going to do. We don't have that much control.
NSP says anyone using less than 500 or more than 1,500 kilowatt hours a month would not save money by switching to off-peak rates because of rate breaks they already get. For those in between, savings would depend on how much usage they would shift to off-peak hours and on how NSP decides to pay for new meters necessary to monitor when a customer uses power as well as how much. The meters will cost about $150, and off-peak customers may have to pick up the whole tab. This is Tom Wayne, Channel 5 Eyewitness News.
NSP says that it hopes to present a proposal for the off-peak rate program to the state by the end of the month. If approved, it could start as early as August. It seemed a lot like August in the Twin Cities area today, with the temperature pushing up to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and that was warm enough for a couple of tropical birds at Lake Calhoun today. Other fans of the outdoors returned to the lakes en masse today for the first time this spring. There was plenty of sun today, enough to start the summer sun tanning process, and there was enough of an April breeze to make sailing a profitable enterprise as well. All in all, a picture of perfection. And when Eyewitness News returns in a moment, we just think Roy Finden will have good news about tomorrow's weather.
More than a name, Aaron's is a family of fine products for all seasons. Aaron's. Like the all-season garden tractor. Winter. It's a two-stage snow throw. Spring. It converts to a 36-inch tiller. Summer. A flex and float mower deck with drive-over mounting. Fall. The new Aaron's vacuum cleans up the yard. Aaron's. Aaron's. A cut above the rest.
See your nearest participating Aaron's dealer.
Schmidt Beer, in its search for the purest water in the world, went down through the St. Peter Strata, the Jordan, the Dreisbach, to where no other brewer has gone, over 1,000 feet down, for water that's been filtered by nature for over 100 years. This pure water, together with the Great Northwest's finest grains and hops and slow natural aging, are your assurance of a great tasting beer. Schmidt. Nobody brews beer with water more pure.
May I begin with a snap quiz?
Oh, well, certainly.
All right, I want you to look at the monitor here in the studio and see if you can identify this bridge. It's a local bridge.
I'd say that's a high bridge in St. Paul.
Exactly right,
Oh,
that is, yes. This was
not rigged, ladies and
gentlemen. No. This was in 1904, and it's not when it was being built. It was just after being hit by a tornado, a storm system that tornadoes touched down in both downtown Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I bring that up because I want to remind you that tomorrow night, right after Eyewitness News, the KSTP Weather Services program, The Killer Tornadoes and New Defense, will be on, and I want you to watch. The word ubiquitous comes to mind when we talk about the 80s on today's map. Ubiquitous meaning all over the place. That sounds strange, like a quiz bowl question too, doesn't it? Well, look at this. 80s, and 70s were even wider ranging. It's got to be a great, huge system that is just covering the country to bring that kind of warmth to such great chunks of it at the same time. Down in Gila Bend, it was 110 degrees today, and that's the highest it's ever been in Arizona in April. Period. Boy, there's a warm system. In the Twin Cities, 80 degrees was the high, and the low last night was an even 50, and it has been a dry day. And at the moment, what are we doing? Well, we're down to 60. The dew point is 34. Relative humidity is 34%. Little northerly wind at 5 miles an hour, and the pressure is rising at an even 30 inches. A rising barometer, high pressure is dry conditions, and that's what we have, continued dry conditions. So we'll continue the fire weather watch for all of Minnesota for the dry conditions. But with that dryness, up above it's dry, you got no clouds. We're going to have sunshine again tomorrow with a temperature rather like today's. And as we look back on the map, there's nothing coming into the picture that suggests any great cooling. In fact, there's nothing in the picture that suggests much rain either for the next several days. So it looks pleasant for comfortable outdoor type things. We can look at the satellite picture and find cloudiness. Remember last night at this time there was a band of clouds over North Dakota which was expected sometime around sunrise where we are. And sure enough, we roll that forward. And right about there is sunrise, and there were the clouds if you were up at sunrise. But just after sunrise, 8 or 9 o'clock, and they were gone. And as we roll through the afternoon and early evening, we can see a little more cloudiness organizing itself. But this is all just some cloudiness not containing any precipitation. and is not expected to be a major factor, though it causes us to say partly cloudy for tonight. Other interesting note coming up, Boston Marathon is coming up on Monday, and the way it looks, temperature there will be somewhere in the 60s and a sunny day. And talk about sports things coming up on Tuesday, baseball time. Wait till you see the extended forecast. But before we get to that, let's go to tonight. Tonight, the forecast for the Twin Cities, partly cloudy and mild, 41 to 50 with light and variable winds. For tomorrow, the forecast says that we shall have mostly sunny skies, warm temperatures again, 73 to 79 with south to southeast winds. And tomorrow night, fair, 45 to 54. Monday, sunny with 79 to 55. And Tuesday is baseball day, and the extended outlook includes Tuesday, a sunny high of 85 and sunny conditions right through midweek.
We are living on Easy Street.
Pretty nice.
Beautiful. Thank you, Roy. Thousands of mourners joined political and intellectual leaders today in the streets of Paris to pay final tribute to philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. French film stars Yves Montand and Simone Signoret were among the mourners pushed along by an oftentimes unruly crowd. Sartre, whose existentialist philosophy influenced two generations of writers and thinkers, died Tuesday night at age 74. A national outpouring of emotion and demonstrations of respect for Sartre led up to today's march. The Minnesota North Stars are having a not-so-easy time of it tonight against the Canadians. This in Game 3 of the Stanley Cup best-of-7 playoffs. We'll check that game in a moment. Ed Karrow standing by.
What's more about Kemp's ice cream? More chocolate chips and toffee candy. More almonds, pralines, mixed nuts, and cherries. And to begin with, more thick, rich cream frozen to a heavy-bodied consistency that means more creamy, smooth ice cream in every carton, more in every spoonful. Number one selling Kemp's in round half gallons has more of what you eat ice cream for. That's why we say more people eat Kemp's, because there's more Kemp's to eat.
Thinking of buying a Volkswagen?
Not just a Volkswagen, a new 1980 Volkswagen.
So what made you come to the Twin City Volkswagen dealers?
Well, they're making some of the best deals around on new and used Dashers, Rabbits, Vanagons, Scirocco's, backed by really terrific service.
No kidding.
No kidding. They even finance them.
Hey, I didn't know that.
Maybe that's why you're asking the questions, and I'm answering them.
Test drive a 1980 Volkswagen at your nearest Twin City Volkswagen dealer.
This little card can be your big inflation fighter for the 1980s. I'm Frank Blair with news about the Midwesterners Club at Midwest Federal. Members get cash discounts at over 800 area stores, a free safe deposit box, colorful rainbow magazine mailed to your home 4 times a year, free clubroom hospitality, and more. So join the club that fights inflation. Simply keep $2,000 on deposit in any Midwest Federal savings account. Visit the office nearest you.
These are not glad tidings you have for us tonight, Ed.
Nope, all those standing O's and those standing room crowds, and but you'd expect that of Montreal.
Yep.
Too much playoff experience. Right. That's the way it's going. North Stars got a rough start at the Met tonight. Unlike their dominant play in the Forum, where they beat the Canadiens twice, their control of things seemed more haphazard tonight, and the Canadiens, back to the wall, were intense. They broke the ice against the Stars when Pierre LaRouche fed Norm Dupont, who scored his first goal of the playoffs on Montreal's 13th shot of the game at 12:49 of the first. That 1-0 lead was doubled less than 4 minutes later. Mark Napier, a rink-long dash out of the Canadiens' end. Napier losing control for a moment when he tried to get around defenseman Kurt Giles, but grabbing the rebound off the end boards and slotting it for Doug Jarvis. 5 minutes later, the second period started. Jarvis scored again, picked up the rebound of his own shot, scored his second goal of the game. Since then, Langway has scored. After 2 periods, it's Canadiens 4 and Stars 0. Scores a bit tardy from other games around the league. The Islanders and Boston, no score in yet. Buffalo leads Chicago going into the third period. No score from the Philadelphia Rangers game. And there's the sad news from the Met, starting the third period shortly. The Twins, who have started miserably on the West this season, are taking their 3-7 record back into the Kingdome tonight. Jerry Kuzman pitching against Glenn Abbott, but after 2 innings, it's good news. Twins 2 and Mariners 0. Elsewhere in the American League, a shutout for Texas over Boston. Milwaukee beat New York. Cleveland, big one over Toronto. 8-6. Detroit over Kansas City. Oakland beat California by 2. In the 10th, it's tied at Baltimore, and the Twins lead the Mariners in the early going. In Pittsburgh, the St. Louis Cardinals slipped by the defending world champs 2-1. In the 8th, George Hendricks single to left knocked in Bobby Bonds to break that 1-all tie. That run was enough for pitcher John Fulgham and his Cardinals. He held the family to just 4 hits, none of those after the second inning. Nice game ender, too. Gary Templeton making the play. Cards beating the Pirates 2-1. Philadelphia beat Montreal 13-4 today. St. Louis, there's their score. Chicago, New York in a marathon. San Diego shut out San Francisco. Cincinnati beating Atlanta. No score in from Los Angeles. They're just starting. And this is Mark Carlson, who in other years might have been at Memorial Stadium today, scrimmaging with a football contingent. Today, they hit this homer as part of a 13-2 burial of Michigan as they opened the Big Ten baseball season. The big performance in that first game came from Mike Lawson. The double produced 2 runs. He added another double and a homer to the log, but in the second game, the pitching faded. The Gophers lost to split. Second score, 7-2. The Gopher football team got their first scrimmage of the season in this morning at Memorial Stadium. And as always, new faces, with North Dakota quarterback transfer Bruce Olson sporting Wendell Anderson's old number 1. That's probably the job he wants to win. And there were some old standbys. Number 41, Marion Barber there, had the big day, running the ball 112 yards on 22 carries and scoring. Well, they call it the Un-Boston Marathon, and it started in St. Paul this morning at 9 at Cretin and Summit Avenues. It's the first big running event of the season for the Minnesota Distance Runners Association, and the first shot at it for a lot of us who have hibernated during the winter and pounded around indoor running tracks and gyms in the area. Today's marathon winner, Dave Peterson, with a time of 2 hours, 53 minutes, 29 seconds. Jerry Heaps was second, and Ron Wagner's win in the 40 and over age group also placed him 3rd overall in that marathon. A couple of brothers had a big bowling session at Minnehaha Lanes last night. Mark Kiger, 19, rolled his second perfect 300 of the season as part of a 7-17 series, while his brother Tom Kiger rolled his first perfect game in his career. They're on different teams, but in the same league. At Aqueduct Racetrack in New York today, the final tune-up before the Kentucky Derby, this the Wood Memorial. Winners here often go on to the Derby and win it, and today it was Plug Nickel grabbing an early lead, holding on for a length-and-a-half victory and $87,000+. And Tom Watson could do no better than a par round, but it didn't matter. He still managed to stretch his lead to 5 strokes in defense of his Tournament of Champions title. Doug Toole is second. North American Soccer League today, Memphis beat Philadelphia, New England beat Fort Lauderdale, Chicago over Atlanta. Big slate on tonight. And one of those games is right here at this live picture you're looking at of Empire Stadium in Vancouver, British Columbia. The reason for our early newscast tonight, because the Minnesota Kicks will take on the Whitecaps out there in Vancouver, and as you can see, it is sloppy, it is wet, it is raining in the Pacific Northwest, and the Kicks will try out there to get their first win of the season against 2 losses.
Okay, Eddie, thank you. Finally tonight from Rapid City, South Dakota, another world record is broken. This time it happens to be the record for the greatest number of tap dancers in a single dance under one roof. There were 890 of them. That's 1,780 footsies, all tapping to break the Guinness Book of World Records. The oldest tap dancer, 79. The youngest was 3. After the 2-minute dance was over, months of preparation ended in delight. That's it. We're out of time. Kicks game is next. Thank you very much for your company, and have a good Sunday. Good night.
Hey, how was bowling?
I'd rather be eating.
A bottomless pit.
Grabbing a quick burger?
We're getting Kentucky Fried Chicken.
The Colonel only uses fresh quality chicken, like I do.
And the way hamburger prices are going, it's nice to get a good, sensible meal at a good, sensible price.
Hey, I'm a going boy.
It's so nice to feel so good about a meal, so good about Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Hey, woodcutters, here's your chance to save $48 on the world's finest firewood saw, the Steel Wood Boss. While they last, you get this whole package, saw, case, extra chain, and more, for $48 less than the regular price. Look for the Wood Boss Spring Special.
Available at Garceau Hardware St. Paul, Paul's Wallpaper St. Peter, Lee's Saw and Tool Cold Spring, and Moon Motor in Monticello.
It's here, Budget Power's Build-A-Rama. Get the biggest savings of the year on everything for every do-it-yourself repair or building project, starting with big lumberyard savings, including special prices on redwood patio decks. Build-A-Rama means great sale prices on paint supplies and all your electrical and plumbing needs, plus every tool you need to get the job done right. For expert advice and great sale prices, shop Budget Power's Build-A-Rama.
Channel 5, KSTP-TV, St. Paul, Minneapolis.